Right, so there's generally no shortage of reasons to want to take Keir Starmer by the scruff, for example, try to shake him, shake the stupid out of him. Sadly, there's too much, we find, that he's clogged up with the stuff, and no matter how much you might want to rid him of some of his senselessness, he seems to be positively constipated with it. I think it's why his face looks so puffy these days, but he's come out with some policy, my goodness, on migration no less, and has managed to tee up the Tories beautifully to attack him, whilst simultaneously managing to give the left yet more reasons to despise him as well. It truly is a talent to be in a position where you want to be elected and yet seem to be winding up more and more of the electorate than you're attracting. It's quite the talent. At least we now know he's good at something, though. So what is he on about then, Damo? Well, it's the small boats crossings, the crisis of people risking their lives to try and get to this country to claim asylum. First and foremost, though, however you feel about these people coming here via small boats from we know not what until they claim asylum, can we agree that none of us want them to die in the attempt, though? If you're the sort that doesn't care about that or thinks they deserve to perish at sea, frankly, just stop watching this video and leave now. Never darken my door or my channel again. Go find a Reform UK supporter or some such to watch. They'll be much more to your liking. GB News, maybe. I've no time for people who, to my mind, are frankly less than human myself, commenting on this with attitudes like that. Alternatively, you might have seen the title and wondered what the mad Cornishman is on. Just open asylum routes, let the whole world come here, ignore the smuggling gangs. What nonsense is this? But bear with me, I've not lost the plot. I believe the gangs do need to be beaten, and I think we should take a fair share of asylum seekers. I just think Starmer, much like the Tories, has no grasp whatsoever on how to actually achieve this. I will start with the one thing Starmer has got right, though, on this, in my opinion. Rare, faint praise for recognising the painfully obvious, as it is, frankly, because we do need a returns policy back in place. And Labour announced that under them this would happen. The obvious caveat here is I'm assuming Starmer will keep his word on this. So, significant caveat there. But he ought to, and is probably likely to, because the lack of an EU returns policy is a significant part of the Tories' problems with migration right now, and one they flat refuse to address in any meaningful way. I've mentioned it in other videos, so I won't dwell on it again here, but this returns policy problem comes from Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, which failed to acknowledge the need for one, which basically allowed us to share the burden of housing people who come here to seek asylum with other countries in the EU. Before we left the EU, we had this arrangement. We took a fair proportion, a fair share, and afterwards we didn't. So now all asylum seekers coming here now have to be housed here. Instead of negotiating a new returns policy with the EU, the Tories instead felt deportations to Rwanda were a better idea, not for asylum seekers, given it is not a safe third country, with a temporary layover on a Legionella-riddled prison barge if they're particularly unlucky. But it looks better for the Tories with regards to their base, because any sign of doing deals with the EU will send the Brexiteers out paying for their blood. In fact, this omission by Johnson is a leading reason as to why we've seen an increase in asylum attempts here, because risking your life to cross the channel right now means you have to be housed here, as things stand. Rwanda is likely to be ruled illegal. Many asylum seekers will know this and are hedging their bets. A returns policy not guaranteeing them housing in the UK would make some of them think twice as to whether that trip across the channel is worth risking their lives for. So Tory immigration policy is not only incompetent, but blatantly in their party's interests and not those of the people affected, certainly not for us as a country. So Labour are, at least on the face of it, not playing to Tory voters on this particular aspect of this issue with negotiating a returns policy, but caveats for that, like I said. If they look like they're losing votes over it, don't imagine the red Tories won't switch and bin it off, say, put themselves first any more than the blue ones already do. So it's yes to a returns policy at this moment in time. That'll bin off Rwanda. No complaints from me here about that. But it's the obviously necessary first move. Yet even this, Starmer screwed up. He couldn't just leave it at a returns policy in his announcements, because targets under said returns policy are something to be negotiated with the EU should the time come. Putting a number on it now, well, that's not something you can really do. Yet Starmer has also said that in exchange for such a deal, there will need to be migrant quotas. And this tells me he doesn't understand what a returns policy with the EU means. It will, by its very nature, restrict numbers allowed to stay here, and as proven by the lack of one now, will reduce the number of crossings. But equally, we have to give the EU an incentive to agree to a returns policy with us again. What is in it for them? You don't get to impose a target on the EU of how many you'll take, given they will be taking a chunk of those coming here. Though equally, Starmer has stupidly given the Tories another attack line because of this, because they're now saying Starmer will let 100,000 migrants a year come here, or 120,000 a year come here. And they won't stop there, because any notion of dealing with the EU will come with accusations that he's going to take us back into the single market and back into the customs union. And while I have no problem with that, I can clearly see the damage the Tories' version of Brexit has done. Mr. Undo Brexit, as he once was, has gone to great pains to distance himself from such notions. Dishonest as Starmer is, many hopeful Europhiles are hoping he's been lying this whole time and will undo Brexit totally when he gets into power. But if you have to lie about your intentions rather than making the case for them, then you're not really a leader, are you? You're a con man. And people who feel conned will abandon you quick smart because they can't trust you. What's the figure you have in mind for these quotas then, though, Keith? And what are you going to offer the EU to agree to this? We don't need to undo Brexit to have such an agreement with them, incidentally, but there has to be something in it for the EU regardless. Obviously, there must be something. You're now under pressure by Tory attack lines to announce what it is, and they're going to keep battering you over this until you say what it is. It's all your own fault you put yourself in this position, and I'm sure the EU would be fascinated to hear it too, because if the figure isn't realistic and fair, if the deal isn't sweet enough, they can scoff and tell you to stuff it. In fact, some EU diplomats have apparently already dismissed Starmer's wish list strategy as delusional. We have no leverage over this, thanks to the Tories. The EU are under no pressure to accept unrealistic targets at all. That isn't something Starmer can be blamed for, of course, but he'll look every bit of the out-of-depth idiot so many of us know him to be if he says a stupid figure on this now. The elephant in the room over all of this, though, is Starmer's defiant rhetoric to treat the small boat people, the people traffickers, that is, like terrorists. So how are you going to do that, then? You have to catch them, have to stop them. The Tories have spent millions trying and failing to stop them. And more boats keep crossing. More people keep drowning as a result. No, I appreciate the Tories care nothing for lives lost at sea. Demands that the RNLI stop rescuing them. Demands that the Navy turn them around in the Channel will not soon be forgotten. Is this what all this British steel for British warships is all about then, Keith, that you were crowing about earlier in the week? The steel is Chinese, calling itself British steel, by the way, and they don't make steel plate for ships at all, but that's another video. But to tackle terrorism on the high seas, is this what they're for? How dare they drop all these people here? How dare they send them to their deaths? How dare they bleed them of their every worldly possession? Now, I agree with all of that. How dare they? But the only way you're ever going to stop people trafficking across the Channel is to put them out of business, not by launching some kind of anti-terrorist and military action against them, or at least spinning the rhetoric of that about, because the Tories have tried and failed that repeatedly. Unless Starmer wants to demonstrate he's just as big a flop on this issue as they are, he's not going to want to repeat everything the Tories have tried and failed to do here. Yet that seems to be exactly what he's saying. Aside from that, the minute boats appear with the language of terrorism being used against them, people will start seeing them and automatically start linking asylum seekers to terrorists, not just the traffickers. Anybody coming over in that boat, they're going to start thinking, oh my God, terrorism. God knows the Tories will certainly spin it that line if it suits them too, and I'm sure they would. Why is it the case for a safe legal asylum route cannot be made by Starmer? Why is he not doing it? The Tories have for years now claimed we have them when we don't. Starmer has never called them out on it that I can remember, and I can only surmise he and his handlers have calculated there's no political capital out of exposing that lie, because it was Labour under Blair, after all, that did away with legal routes to claim asylum. The same people that are pulling Starmer's strings now. So no wonder such political thinking is off the table, but equally, it's why rotten lefties are pointing out the simple fact that without a safe legal route, people are going to continue to die. Their reasons for coming here are their own. Their case for asylum is their own. Let them make it without risking their lives to do so and negotiate a returns policy with the EU, so we end up only taking a fair share of them here to house anyway. Yet this is Starmer's conundrum. This is his problem. And this is something he's created all for himself. He will drive away those longed-for right-wing votes if he capitulates on a returns policy and opens up safe and legal asylum routes, having done so much damage to the left in his conduct for years, and not least his dishonesty. Unless he signals a dramatic departure from Tory migration policy, he won't be winning any of those votes back either. If that's even a reasonable expectation anymore, given everything else he's done to attack the left. Fundamentally, he's ticking off the right and the left with his clumsy ineptitude. Therefore, asylum seekers and migration policy is probably as doomed to failure under Starmer's Labour as it is under the Tories now. He's afraid to lead. He's afraid to make the case for something. We have a weakling Prime Minister now. We'll probably have a weakling Prime Minister again after the next election, no matter who ends up entering number 10. And what's more, he's saying if you don't agree with him on this issue, Starmer, if you don't agree with him, then you're being un-British. Well, you can shove half a dozen flags up your backside and call yourself the British hedgehog for all I care, Keith. There's nothing patriotic about you, your plans, or whether or not we agree with them here. And I'd think long and hard before connecting your plans for any semblance of what counts as national pride. Because there's nothing to be proud of with what you've done with Labour. And there's certainly nothing to be proud of by carrying on with Tory policy that still leads to people drowning in the Channel. But what do you think of all of this, though? Is Starmer onto something? Do you think he's misleading people as to what he'll really do? Or is he going to be just as big a failure on migration policy as the Tories are now? I just wish we'd get a government that would look at these people crossing as living, breathing fellow human beings and not numbers on a piece of paper. But have your say in the comments and be part of the conversation on this. Tell me your thoughts. Thanks for watching, though. I hope you found the video useful. Please like, share, and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. If you'd like to support the channel or find me on other social media, check out the Linktree link. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where the Tories' answer to the migration crisis is to become even more hard-right with their joke of a deputy chairman, 30p, Lee Anderson, having recently made a tirade that could have easily come from Enoch Powell. I'll hopefully see you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.